Hey, everybody, people over with Corrections Unfiltered, podcast where corrections meets conversation. We want to thank everybody for taking their time to watch our shows, and we also want to ask you, please hit that subscribe button. If you like the content, hit that like, and especially share it if you'd like. We sure would appreciate that. Tonight, we have a great show for you. We're going to be talking to James Buckner. James retired after more than 21 years with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, where he was an intelligence analyst. James is going to talk to us about confidential informants and how it actually operates. So let's get into this podcast and let's hear what James has to say. Welcome, Chris McConnell. How you doing, buddy? Thanks for being here.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
James, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing pretty good. Glad to be here with both you guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're great to have you. Yes, sir. So, with this conversation that started with me and you on LinkedIn was talking about how staff members feel that they're involved in this confidential informant world where really it's a pretty strict environment. So, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself, sir, and then we'll start getting this conversation.
Okay. Well, like you said, retired from the BOP after 21 and a half years. Had a really enjoyable experience working there. Started with state and county corrections in Kentucky. A year, Fayette County Jail, 10 years with Kentucky DOC. And I was also a staff trainer, did OJT training for new officers coming on board. Now, from a logistical standpoint, FMC Lexington, where I wound up going, is literally right across the street from the state joint that I worked at. So I would bring guys in, get them trained, get them on the right track, and probably within 6 months to a year, they were out the door. And I started thinking, it's like, what am I doing? I'm getting these guys ready, and I'm sending them over here, which is a great thing because it's like a pipeline situation, but pipeline for staff, not inmate pipeline. So I was hitting close to 34, 35. So I thought about it. If I'm going to make the jump, I might as well go for it. So
Yeah.
I literally made it through the window and it lost a shoe on the way in. It was that close. And it wound up being the best decision I ever made in my life.
That's great to hear. That is great to hear.
Yeah, I'm glad to retire from there. I'm also glad to have made it to CTU. When guys come on board, I don't think they have any idea of just how many different directions they can go. CTU came online, of course, in response to 2001, 9/11. And the objective is to keep tabs on the internationals and domestics in BOP custody.
Let me say hi, James, and welcome to Corrections Unfiltered. I look forward to our conversation as I want our listeners and I want law enforcement in general to realize intelligence and confidential informants, what we're talking about tonight, called CIs, inside our correctional institutions is an untapped treasure trove of information. Gangs, drug operations, terrorism, extremism, introductions, continuing criminal activity, you name it. So let me start off by saying a very bold statement. If you do not have confidential informants in your facility, you are wrong, period. But what is a confidential informant? A confidential informant, especially in a prison, is an inmate who provides information about inmate prohibited activities. Plans to assault, plans to escape, plans to introduce contraband, corruption, hiding spots, gambling, inmate shot callers, any prohibited activity. And CIs are our eyes and ears inside the institution. I tell leadership, investigators, intel officers, you must manage by walking around and talk with the staff and the inmates. And that alone will give you most of what you need to know. Confidential informants will give you the rest of what you need to know. What say you, Jim?
Absolutely agree 100%. And that's a good thing about you guys, all three of us having shared experiences. I had a lieutenant that would live and die by that walk and talk style of supervision. That's what he believed in. Don't sit in the officer station. Get up, get your butt out there, walk around, get a feel for what's going on. If you're a compound, get out on the compound. Sit on the rec table for a little bit. Watch out, see who's sitting there, see who's doing what, who's talking to who. Walk and talk. That's what keeps everything safe. If you don't do that, you're just pretty much inviting disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree 100%. You got to get out there. You got to get a feel for it. And what you don't shake out that way, the rest of it will shake out with those CIs. And that way we can do everything we can to make sure these places stay safe for us and the population.
When a new employee starts, inmates will pick up on the fact that there is some, they're naive, that they're not really up to what shenanigans and up to the types of manipulation that the inmates are about to put upon them. They think they are, and they have good hearts about it. But the reality is a couple of classes really didn't get you ready. It's that experience that you get, going through the grind is what gets you there. But there is a group of staff members, especially young in their careers, that will get manipulated by an inmate to say, hey, look, I like the way you work. I like who you are. I'm going to defend you. We're going to save you. They're not. Going to give them these reasons to build up their confidence. And then they're going to say, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you a little bit of information here, a little bit of information there that you can share with people. But whatever you do, you can't tell them who told you, because I'm your confidential informant. So now that Chris has defined what the confidential informant is, can you give an explanation to the viewers to say, that's not the road you want to go down? That's a very slippery slope that you don't even want to get on.
I tell you what, and when I throw this title out there, you guys are going to be all over it because we've all heard it. I think it's one of the reasons it's important that new staff, all new staff, state, federal, county, local, whatever sort of corrections they work, they need to read and understand the short story Downing a Duck.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, and it's about as corrections 101 as you can get.
It's
But
legit.
yeah. I mean, that's the reason they don't want to go down that path, because they're getting pulled into something that they don't really understand. They're thinking of, okay, this is how I'm going to get my promotion. This is how I'm going to get recognized. They're using old terms on our side of it. This is how I'm going to make my bones. I've got this guy. He's helping me out. Nobody else knows about it. I'm going to find all the dope. I'm going to get sent to recall. All of a sudden, you're overnight sensation.
The inmates convince them it's going to be that way.
Yeah.
But you got to keep this a secret, though. This is between us.
That's and that phrase right there, that part of it, that should be what alerts them to something's wrong with this picture. Now, seasoned staff, we hear it, we know. They're not quite seasoned yet. So they're not able to pick up on that red flag that, if this were a football game with what you just said, that would be the flag on the play. But they don't see the flag. They don't realize that, okay, you just got a penalty and it's not going to be 5 yards. It might be 5 years.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yes, sir.
But yeah, that's the thing. From interactions like that to things that mainline, and it makes play so many mind games. You're patting the guy down. Are you this? Or are you that? Or what's wrong with you? And they start conditioning you from day one. And with going back to with what you were saying, that hey, I'm your guy, and that downing the duck thing. Hey, you're going to keep your unit clean. Your floors are going to look more better than anybody else on the unit. Sanitation, and the whole time they're trying to break you down step by step.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that younger staff person, they don't see it coming. And the next thing you know, they violate that cardinal rule. You got a cigarette back when we could smoke.
There you go.
I never did smoke, but you got a cigarette. Can I have one of those, or can I have this? If they can get that young staff member to view them as something other than just the offender that they are. And when I say it, I'm not being, hopefully not too insensitive, but if they can start that process of becoming more human, not that they're not human, that common ground, then they kind of got you pulled in.
Yeah.
And then that's how they start developing that duck. And they've got to realize that they're being groomed.
Yes, sir.
It's classic manipulation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, inmates will tell staff information, and it happens all the time. However, I don't recommend staff try to manage an inmate as an informant, because this takes training, skill, resources, and a high degree of secrecy. And it is serious business. If you expose their identity, you can and will get someone hurt or killed. At one point, I had an extremely powerful shot caller and a shot caller in a prison as a gang leader as an informant. If his identity was exposed, that would have been an automatic green light. Many people would have been seriously injured or killed. Inmates use the phrase, snitches get stitches. What does that mean? That's saying that the confidential informant will get stabbed. So if a staff member receives information that could threaten any impact of the safety or security of the institution, report it to your shift command or investigative supervisor immediately. Do not manage that on your own.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and that's what happens is they feed them those little things. Hey, there was a fight in cell 207, or there's going to be a fight in 207. But now this is how they build their credibility with the officer. See, I told you a couple things that worked out. Now keep that between us. No matter who asks you, don't give up that information.
Number one, like Chris said, take that information to the right place. If you're on a shift, go to your shift commander. Go to your lieutenant. Whoever's on the desk, who's ops, who's activities, whatever. Go to one of those guys. And even if the SI is not there, even if the SISX aren't there, go to one of those lieutenants and hand that football off. They're not equipped to run with it yet. Hand it off to somebody that can. Other thing is things that are not going to come to them automatically. Why is this guy coming to me with this? Why is he approaching me with this particular bit of information? But the main thing is hand that football off. Because if you don't, then we're getting into some pretty bad things. If they were trained, they might realize that that information is being given to possibly knock off their competition. So, one of the first things they want to do, hey, if I can get my competition knocked off, or the other weed man, or the other guy that's applying this or that, if I can get rid of him, I can corner that market. Right. Now, with our background, we're going to know to say, hey, man, what are you doing? Why are you coming to me? And people might say I might shoot myself in the foot with this, but I would always ask them, why are you coming to me? What for? It's not the most popular thing to do. Who wants to be labeled a snitch or even carry that tag? So first thing I would do is say, hey, why? I would want to establish that right off the top. And a lot of times they look at me like I was crazy, but hey, what's this for?
I think that was the most difficult part for me as I was moving up in the chain of command, and you begin having more and more involvement with staff who feel they have these, CIs, and they're so conditioned by the inmate not to give up their identity that even in a position of warden, they're telling me, I can't tell you. I said, well, now here's where we have the problem, because if you don't think you can tell me what's going on, I don't need you working in this prison because they've got you that far. But the inmate had them so conditioned that they believed that that's exactly what I was going to say. And no matter what you do, stick to it. I can remember all these conversations of staff members who were not ready for that level of manipulation, being led down that road and then not believing the people who they should trust to say, right, you're in a spot you don't need to be, but we're going to get you out of that. We're going to take care of this for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I saw that happen a few times too. And you're right. Once they get their hooks into them, it's difficult to kind of bring them back. And
it sure is.
The staff member that goes down there, then just going back to that story again, all of a sudden you're faced with, no matter what I do, my career is over. If I say anything and expose it, I got trouble. If I don't say anything, I've got a lot more trouble because this guy's going to keep pumping me for whatever that he's got me into now. And that's why they should just steer clear of it like the plague, because it's a lose-lose game. I was reading the news just the other day. Young man, I want to say 135 months, but unfortunately, one of the things we've got to do is let people know, hey, this is what can happen.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about a scary proposition, going from a uniform to a jumpsuit. I wouldn't even begin to want to think about what that felt like. And sadly, I think between the three of us, we'd probably lose count if we look back at the number of folks that we've seen go that way.
Absolutely.
And in a lot of
Yes, sir.
cases, people we never would have anticipated or thought would go that way. And it may not have come out of what we're discussing here tonight, but whatever the circumstances were, I think things like this, and that's one of the things that attracted me to Corrections Unfiltered, is the prospect of sharing information that'll keep staff on the right track,
Yes,
so
sir.
that they can, at some point, be like us, sit back and retire and enjoy what we work for. We're not
Yes, sir.
doing this just for the heck of it. We're doing this with the end game, and
That's
you
right.
can't enjoy it if you're sitting in a joint somewhere and you used to work
Right.
at the joint somewhere.
That's right, James. We call it cat and mouse, man. I mean, some inmates flip staff and some staff flip inmates. And when I was a special investigative supervisor, my job was to flip inmates. I developed many CIs throughout my tenure. I had CIs in white groups, black groups, Hispanic groups. I had it
Yeah.
all covered. My intel office knew everything going on at the institution. It was a high security penitentiary. And the simple way I looked at it, it was my basic responsibility to the staff and inmates to provide that safe and secure environment, disrupt security threat groups, prevent violence, combat corruption. It was my duty to know everything, and I took that duty seriously.
Yeah, it's just I think it's a critical part of our mission to, like you said, protect staff, um, using the information that we got to keep them where they need to be. And the other thing about it, they don't have the tools, the resources. One of the things that, and I'm pretty sure all three of us can probably agree on this as well. Some of the most insane things in one particular issue that would cause me to kick a CI for the curb. Don't approach me on the compound. Please do not approach me on the compound. But invariably, you have some knucklehead. You're standing there at main line, and then all of a sudden, here he comes. And the first thing I'm thinking is that, okay, please let this guy walk on by. Please let him go to his unit, go to the rec yard where he's going. And invariably, one of these knuckleheads will walk up to you and start wanting to talk. And you're having to pretty much shut him down without trying to make too much of a scene out of it, because he doesn't understand, or maybe he does. If he's trying to check in, you might understand. But other than that, it's like, dude, whatever we are trying to establish, you're getting ready to blow the whole thing up right here. Everybody's watching you, and they want to know why you're coming up and talking to me. And if you're a lieutenant, if you're SIS, even if you're a tech, and you get approached out there, then okay, his cover's pretty much blown. And that kind of covers two areas right there. They don't understand the gravity of interactions like that. And another thing that they don't understand is the importance of understanding what need to know information means.
Yes.
What need to know information means. That's critical. And they talk. Inmate.com, it spreads like wildfire. That need to know says, okay, that's going back to where you were, Pete, with handing that football off. There's some things that get to a point, hey, this is over my pay grade. So I'm going to hand it off to somebody. But those younger officers, those rookies, they don't get that. They don't know it.
So that's what's great about having you and Chris on here, because you both have done it. You both have run it. Would you mind just kind of going through to let the listeners understand that what the process is, that I, as a correctional officer, with the best of heart, the best of intentions, I'm doing my duties. I don't have the equipment and the ability to do this. So I need to let you take that football from me. Can you explain how that process works to create a CI?
I tell you, I'd like to defer to Chris on that one. I think his background is stronger in that than mine, and I definitely would like to defer to him for that.
Chris?
Well, there is a validated process for confidential informants. And if I recall correctly, there's a whole policy on it, but if I recall correctly, they had to provide you 3 pieces of verifiable information. And it had to be, it can't be something real small, a cigarette butt over. No. We're not talking that. 3 pretty significant pieces of information that you could verify and substantiate before we could validate them as a confidential informant.
Yes.
And that way you could use them in your investigations. And of course, you use them as your eyes and ears in the institution.
And that's
Yeah.
so important. I'm glad you said that. There is a policy that manages this. And that policy is there to make sure when they give this information up, they're developing credibility. So they could, if they've given you 10 bits of information, but only 8 of them have worked out, they're at 80%. Why is that important? Because chances are when you're dealing with confidential informants, whatever they're giving you information on is going to lead to a crime, or it's about a crime, and it's going to end up in court. And so when they have to start explaining how all of this unfolded, the people who manage the confidential informants are able to show what percentage that they have of credibility. So this is not a game where we just kind of have these people who do it and an inmate can make a deal with somebody.
Right.
There's credibility that has to be established because this is going to end up in court.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the whole court thing. Rookie officers not thinking about having to sit down with the AUSA and having to hash it out, and court testimony and being able to provide that logbook that shows reliability, being able to show that, okay, this is the way this particular crime developed, and to follow it all the way from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
And they're just not prepared for it. They don't understand the full impact of just where this thing could go. And hopefully it doesn't wind up in causing somebody to get sued, because that can happen. I was actually sued by an informants a couple of times because they didn't follow the protocol. And you can wind up in court over that also, because they'll turn right around and say that somehow you managed to endanger them.
Well, just to piggyback a little bit, when you flip an inmate to a confidential informant, like you said, you have to set clear expectations, because some CIs are great and real secretive, but others, they want to be super cop, and they're the
Yeah.
ones you need to worry about, and they're the ones who feel invincible. They're the ones that haphazardly talk to you and other inmates about everything. And as an investigator, you need to make that tough decision. If they continue to act careless, you need to drop them as a CI, because for me, their safety is more important than information.
Absolutely.
And we talked about another thing. It's kind of funny about, inmates coming up and talking to you. I have somewhat of a funny story, and it involves the host on this show. So, and I literally remember this like it was yesterday. We were walking down a secure corridor together, and I was with your host, Mr. Pete Bludworth. At the time, I was a lieutenant and an investigator, and Pete was my supervisor, my captain. And as we were walking, an inmate walked by me and said, "Hey, Lieutenant, what time is it?" And I said in a very rude and aggressive way with a mean look on my face, I said, "It's about time for you to take responsibility and get a watch." That's what I said. Well, the inmate mumbled something like, "You're an a-hole, Lieutenant." And even Pete looked at me and said, "Hey, man, you talked to him pretty greasy." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I know. He's one of my informants. He needs to talk to me." And then Pete just shook his head and started laughing. And because you have to have these signs and sayings, when an inmate, an informant needs to talk to you urgently, but that was a pretty funny story.
I like it. I love it.
And I'll tell you, that's what is neat about myself and Chris was we work well together because we respect each other's weaknesses and strengths.
Mhm.
And I'm not the guy to run CIs. I'm not that guy. I don't play poker. I don't do anything like that. So it's why where Chris came in, because Chris had that ability to do it. And I've always been envious of it. And I've always admired him for being able to do it. And so that's where the yin and yang came in between the two of us. That's why, and if you ask me, that's why that yard stayed the way that it stayed, was because there was people who had their thumb on the pulse. Yeah, you have those surprise things. We all have those surprise moments where an inmate shows up that we weren't expecting, or there was a conflict that we were not aware of because it's from the street or from whatever, some other agency. But most of the time, there was always somebody who had a pulse on it. Chris was that man.
Yeah, that playing each other's strengths helps out tremendously. We operated the same team with election, and the group of techs that we had there. Whoever the strongest writer was, okay, we're doing that. And I'm going back to the days when we were walking around with 3.5 floppy disks with affidavits on them and going back and forth before we graduated to where we are now.
Yep.
But that playing to each other's strengths, it really makes a difference. What Chris was talking about earlier, and even with that story, it reminds me of something else that these rookie staff don't have access to, and that's places to conduct interviews that are clandestine.
That's right.
So,
That's
if I want to do a call out, okay, I can have this guy somewhere where nobody's going to even suspect that. Or if I'm in a clutch, I can call up psychology tech, say, hey, look, I need to use the office for about 30 minutes. Can you do me a favor? And sure, no problem. And I could slide down there. Population sees me go in. Okay, they're not thinking twice about it. A few minutes later, the other guy shows up. They think he's there to see the doctor or whatever. So whether it was psychology, whether it was medical, wherever it was, we had the ability to pick up the phone and say, hey, we need a place to talk to this guy. And that rookie that's out there that we're trying to steer clear of this doesn't have that. If he's on a housing unit, you only have so many places you can go. So somebody's going to see it, whether it's the officer station,
And
whether it's.
That's what's so important because you've mentioned some things. You've mentioned like they may be trying to check in. The inmate might be up to this, or they give you these like Chris. Chris had already set up a system in which to communicate with somebody, or the communication was going to happen where he knew this person needed to talk to him. But it wasn't obvious. It wasn't as though he walked up and said, Chris, I got something for you. It wasn't like that at all. It was something that happened frequently throughout that facility. It didn't stand out as abnormal. Stood out as normal to me because I hadn't seen it happen at that time before. And that's what's so important is we've been talking about a policy. We've been talking about the different verbiage. We've been talking about their different intentions. And that is not to give a slight to the new staff. It's to say, give yourself some time, report what the inmates are saying to you, so you didn't get caught in this world that you're not prepared for, it. Two, you don't need to be in. You just don't need to be in it.
Agreed.
Hey, Jim, I got another funny story you might appreciate. I actually had 2 confidential informants get in a fight with each other. So both of my informants, neither of them knew they were informant, got in a fight with each other. And of course, they both ended up in the special housing unit, but I needed them both back in population. And
oh boy.
So I called one informant to the special housing unit interview room and pretended I was mad, and I was yelling like a lunatic. I can't believe you got in a fight. Who is this clown you fought with? And now I have to fix this mess. I can't believe you put me in this situation. I'm going off. And then he leaves and goes back to his cell. And then I call the other informant to the special housing unit interview room and said the exact same thing. So that was a pretty tricky situation, but it worked.
You got to do what you got to do.
Say so.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. But you do it. It sounds kind of funny now, but you do it to protect them. I have not exposed anyone's identity that worked for me. And, I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of that.
But it takes a lot of seasoning to get to the point where you can do that, to develop communication systems like that. And Pete, you mentioned the same thing as far as what they're aware of and being thrown into this world all of a sudden. Walk in the yard, wherever you are, you're literally, and I'm just kind of going off the top of my head, it's almost like it really is a living, breathing thing. It's like an organism. You got to get accustomed to the sights, to the sounds, to the smells, so that you know when something's off. And that young officer doesn't have that skill yet. They have no idea.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's like a barometer. You walk in, you two guys could to this day walk in and know and sense something's not right. Now that younger officer, again, we're trying to get them to the point where they do recognize that barometer, where they do know something doesn't sound right. We've all heard those stories where folks aren't going to main line and all those signs and signals that let you know that, hey, something's ruined here. You walk into the dining hall, something doesn't sound right. So they've got to get accustomed to those sensations and to taking those things in, as opposed to just being an observer, but till you become literally part of that organism so that you feel it. If I ain't feeling it, I'm not really connected to it yet.
Let's say you had a big incident inside the cell house or chow hall, whatever, and you lock a place down because you want to do this big view and find out what the heck happened and get your stuff together. Make sure when you do open the facility open again, you have safety. At least you believe that you're as safe as you can possibly be. You've got to walk. You've got to look in those cells. You've got to get that feel. And that's what Chris
Absolutely.
gets. That's what we all get after periods of time is there's just a feel of tension that you can walk into an area. You know, when you look into a cell and the guy that normally talks to you is like,
Mhm.
probably things aren't the way you think that they should be. Or you see another guy who just can't wait to talk to you, who never spoken to you before. There's a reason why they're doing those things, and you might need to take a better look at it. That's where the CIs come in. Because
Yes.
you develop these systems that you talked about where you can communicate with them. They tell you what the problem is. So when you do open up, you've done all the research you possibly can to make sure that you've taken the necessary steps to have a safer facility when you open up.
Absolutely.
We talked about CIs, which is great. You know, that's something that's clandestine. That's finding out information without anybody knowing. But I also like the fact that any inmate should have the ability to provide information to staff members in a safe manner. So, and I have a strong opinion on this. We know that 911 is an emergency contact number. And my opinion, every institution should have an emergency contact number posted above the inmate phone banks. And I did it at a penitentiary and I called it Report a Crime. And that phone number will ring into investigative services. And if there's no answer, a voice message can be left. And this will allow any inmate the ability to report any activity at any given time. It works. I've done it. It's beautiful. I just kind of wanted to get your take on that as well.
Right. I like the way you've labeled it. We just call it a snitch phone, but I like the way you label it a lot better because it takes some of that stigma away from it. But I'm all for it. We were able to do the same thing, and it brought us some amazing information. Having that line gives an inmate an opportunity to say what he needs to say because every now and then, some of them come forward just because it's the right thing to do. You know, we've all heard those phrases
Yeah,
like, hey,
they
they ain't
do.
here for singing too loud in the church choir. But every now and then, I've had maybe once in a blue moon, an informant will come forward just because, hey, I don't like this. You know, I've lived like this all my life. I'm trying to do this is the guy that says he's trying to do his bit and go home. But he's taking it a step further and saying, not only do I want to do my bit and go home, but I don't want this stuff around me. They realize how it's affected their lives, how it's affected their families, and they're looking forward to saying, okay, I want to take advantage of rehabilitation. You know, the one thing we can't control, we can offer it. We can offer all the programs under the sun, but until they avail themselves to them, it's not going to make any difference. But that one guy that says, I don't want this. So, Chris, that's why I think that is so valuable because it gives those inmates an opportunity to say, okay, I want this stuff out of here. I don't want the dope in my house. I don't want the creatine in my house. I don't want the heroin in my house, you know, black tar, whatever it might be. You know, I didn't come here for that. I'm trying to turn my life around. And there are a few of them out there. And that Crime Stoppers phone line, I like that. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think it's a better way to frame it. I like that.
And you made a great point with these inmates. Some of them do want to do the right thing. And I vividly recall interviewing an inmate about an incident report. And he kind of wanted the incident report to go away because he was afraid of losing his visitation privileges. And of course, I just asked the question. I said, hey, maybe give me something good and perhaps I can see if that visitation privileges will not be suspended. And he looked right in the eyes and he told me about some unsolved armed bank robberies in a large city.
Oh, man.
Okay, nothing to do with my institution, but I called this is true. I called the FBI in that area and asked them if they had any interest in interviewing this inmate. And I told them what the inmate told me. And of course, the FBI says, yeah, we'll be there first thing. You know, again, some people just want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And
Yep. Yeah, and we got to take that into account. That's the other thing, and talking with both of you and the way things have flowed this evening is, despite the number of years that we've all got in, we've still got filters that let us know that, okay, there's the possibility that this could be that inmate. We've not become so jaded that we reject the possibility that this guy could be doing it just because it's the right thing. And that's another part of that seasoning that helps us do our jobs well. It's what's helped Pete with the success in his career. It's what helped Chris with the success in his career, is that ability to still see that it is possible that, hey, this guy could be doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But to have enough of the other side not to get played. And those younger guys, they don't have that yet. We're trying to give them enough longevity to get it. And there's a inmate saying that, and you guys have probably heard this too, game is sold, not told. We're giving them the game. We're trying to give them the game. We're not selling it to you. We're offering it free of charge. We want to help you extend your career.
And that is why I'm so glad that you reached out and we decided to have this conversation tonight, because this is one of those areas that people, that new officers, new staff get trapped in. You never know. You could be the next Chris McConnell. You could be the next James Buckner. We don't know yet, but we will in time.
Amen.
I hope the listeners take 3 things away from this podcast. Number 1, every correctional facility must establish and validate confidential informants. Trust me, you'll be glad you did, and you'll become aware of information within your facility you didn't even think was happening. Number 2, establish a contact number for inmates to call and report a crime. If your facility has 50 inmates, 100 inmates, or 1,000 inmates, believe me, some of those inmates will call and do the right thing and tell you if something big is happening or about to happen. And number 3, do not manage confidential informants unless you have the skill, the resources, the policy to back it up.
Amen.
Chris, absolutely perfect 3 points to make. And that's the reason why we had this podcast, was to get this information out so that we can save staff members' careers and the ball could be put in the right hands to run as far down the field as it can go. Can't thank you enough, Chris, for what you brought to the table today. James Buckner, this podcast would not have happened without you, sir. You reached out. We started talking. Before you know it, here we are tonight. So I really want to thank you for being here tonight. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you, too.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chris.
Thank you.